Hi folks, welcome to week 5 of general psychology. And if you are like me, you spent some of this beautiful weekend working on your general psych class. But I tell you, the work that you're doing is really so good that I really did enjoy the grading and the reviewing that I was doing this afternoon. So this week we're going to be talking about cognition and social psychology. And so I'll tell you, there's a lot of discussion on thinking biases, and social psychology really does a lot of work, I guess, exposing the realities of human behavior. We often like to think that we would behave in one way, but the data suggests that that's not often true. So things like the Milgram experiment you'll learn about, where people were willing to deliver what was essentially a fatal shock to a stranger simply because an experimenter told them to do so. Now, certainly that's not the kind of thing we would expect to be true about 2/3 of people, and yet repeatedly Milgram and others have found this result. So, if the research about false memory last week didn't reveal to you that you don't know yourself as well as you think, certainly this week will hammer that home. So let's go ahead and get to that folder. And as usual for this week, we start off with the reading guide that summarizes the objectives. Your videos are more from, we have a couple videos from Hank with the crash course in psychology, covering some core topics in social psychology as well as cognition. But then I've also pulled some additional videos that I think are really good. So you can see some of them are fairly short. This discussion of fundamental attribution error, which is where we hold people to a different standard than we hold ourselves. That's a very brief summary of it. Also groupthink, which refers to our tendency to basically silence ourselves and go along with others even when we know that we're correct. And so I realize that some of you may be too young to remember the Challenger explosion that killed all of the astronauts and one teacher that was on board, but that was really a reflection or a function of groupthink. And I think this video does a nice job of describing that. Then this is really one of my favorite studies, the smoke-filled room. This is done by the same researchers that covered the bystander intervention research study that's in the UPR presentation this week. And that has some really interesting findings related to conformity and the role of other people in influencing our behaviors. And so lots of interesting stuff going on in the videos. And now after you have reviewed the reading and reviewed the videos, I also have a reading here that is relevant to the journal reflection you'll do this week. So you did the journal reflection. I graded everything that was done by Sunday afternoon. Folks did that really nicely. And you're going to do a journal reflection again this week, but perhaps a little bit more challenging, raising the bar a little bit, because here you are going to be reviewing the reading, examining the link between wealth and academic success, or wealth and IQ. And certainly there are some obvious reasons why people who are wealthier might have a higher level of academic achievement. Wealthier people can pay for tutors. They have computers in their house, and they're sending their kids to the better schools, and absolutely that plays a role. But one of the reasons why I really like this article is because it explores some other factors that maybe you don't think about, like the role of health insurance, the role of prenatal nutrition, the role of parental stress to influence kids' academic achievement. And so what you're being asked to do in the journal reflection is to consider at least one factor related to family investment theory, so that's a heading in the article, and then one factor related to stress theories. And I do want you to go beyond those more obvious things that I already mentioned, that I also summarize right here. So your journal reflection, you can see, has to be at least 250 words. That should not be a challenge at all, given the task. And then in addition to discussing these factors, I also want you to consider a possible solution. So we'll use some creative and practical intelligence on this task. And that's due at the end of the week, next Monday morning. Then the other big graded activity that you have is the social psych in action, and this is a group discussion. And this was something that I did last semester that I thought went really well. There's a lot of discussion about GOP candidate Donald Trump, and certainly in the spring a lot of discussion about the violence or aggression that was reportedly occurring at his political rallies. And so what I've asked you to do is to consider how some of the social psych concepts that we are reviewing, and I've listed the relevant ones here, how they might be helping to explain what's actually going on. And so I've provided you with two different articles for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with what was going on at Trump rallies. And even if you have some knowledge, I think this article and another one that I have in the assignment are really good to help us better understand what's happening. And then what I'd like you to do is choose one of these concepts. As we've done before, you can reserve the concept. And then in your post, you will be summarizing the concept. Make sure you don't forget that. And then explain how it applies to something going on with the Trump rallies. Thinking about it can talk about the supporters, the protesters, Trump himself, and even the media, the way that the media is covering the event. And then finally, just a little bit of a reflection on how understanding this social psych concept might change or influence the way you interpret, I guess, the violence that's happening or the media's coverage of that violence. So that's going on in your post. And then, of course, you also have your two responses, and I have the kinds of information that you can do in your responses. For the most part, people are doing a really great job of offering unique inputs, but I'll just remind you, you want to make sure that each of your contributions is adding something new to the conversation. Make sure that you are not just repeating what others have said. I mentioned that there was another article that I provided. This one right here is an excerpt from a longer article, and this is, the article was written by a woman who was not a Trump supporter, but who attended, I guess kind of an incognito, attended the rally. And although she doesn't actually state the social psych concepts by name, her reporting certainly hints at or gets at some of the concepts that we were discussing this week. All right, so the usual thing, first post by Thursday night, and then two responses by the end of the week, Monday morning. Now, there was also a topic that I wanted to cover, and I decided to make it as an extra credit all-class discussion. And this is asking you to consider how some of the cognition concepts that we are reviewing actually relates to the idea of a full moon effect on people's behavior. So the data indicate that there is absolutely no truth to the concept that the full moon influences our behavior. And here I'm asking you to think about women going into labor. There's no link between the cycle, the lunar cycle, and whether it's a full moon or not, and the rates of women going into labor. But the nurses at Women and Babies will swear to you, at least the ones that I encountered, will swear to you that it's true. And so I want you to choose at least one of the concepts discussed in the cognition chapter and consider how it helps us to understand this false belief. And even if you can't specifically name the concept, but you think you have a pretty good explanation of what's going on, definitely put that in your post. All right, maybe I or some later responders can actually help you identify a particular concept. So this is for extra credit. It's up to 10 extra credit points. The post is 6 points, response is 4. And you are certainly welcome to respond even if you did not do the post. So to do that, you'll just go to the discussions. You're not going to your group page. This is an all-class discussion. And then right here, you would click and then go ahead and just do a discussion board contribution as you would have on the group page. All right, so back to the learning materials folder. Of course, we have the UPR presentations. This week, we have two topics. One for the cognition chapter is titled What You Expect is What You Get. I don't know if any of you follow the Invisibilia podcast out of NPR. They just did a podcast on this topic last week. And this refers to the power of teachers' expectations of a student to actually shape their intellectual development. I think this is a really interesting and certainly important and highly applicable research study. And so you'll review that one as well as a research study related to social psychology and the factors that influence whether or not we help a person when we see that they are in need. The bystander effect, this particular study, was done by researchers who were interested in the concept of diffusion of responsibility. The idea that if there are more than just a few people around, we're much less likely to act. Of course, as I have every week, I'll remind you that you are expected to comment on 7 of the 10 UPR presentations. Keep that in mind. We have our weekly quiz. The same basic guidelines exist, 45 minutes to complete it. You have 2 attempts that are available. This week it's just multiple choice, none of those annoying multiple answer questions, just multiple choice. And then if you haven't submitted the Walk in Their Shoes outline, it was initially due at the end of last week, but I pushed the deadline a little bit later. So if you have not submitted your outline, you still have, of course, a few more days to do it, and that also means a few more days to get some feedback on your notes, feedback on your outline. Definitely reach out to me if you are experiencing challenges with any of these tasks. So it occurs to me, thanks to some emails I've gotten from people, that you might be having some trouble figuring out how to cite your sources, right? They're kind of odd. Blogs, interviews, chat rooms, videos, they're just odd. So to provide you with some guidelines on that, I have, first of all, added in another sample paper. And so if we open up this sample paper, what you will see is that I've given some examples of how you would go about actually doing these citations in an actual paper. So here you have a blogger where the name of the author and the date is actually provided. There might actually be some where there is no date at all, although that's not true. Usually blogs give you the date. But if you don't have an actual name of the blogger, you can use the first couple of words of the blog's title. Then if you go to the end, I also have examples of how it's done in the references section. Now, in addition to this, I have also given you this citations and references guide. And so this is something that itemizes how you actually go about doing various types of citations, blogs, YouTube videos, personal interviews, because I know some of you are interviewing people, as well as websites. And so I've tried to explain the general format as well as a specific example of how you would go about doing those citations. So hopefully that answers questions, but definitely if you're running into other sources and don't know how to cite them, just send me an email. All right, I look forward to reading your contributions for this week. Have a great week. Bye-bye.